Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Charlene Israel. Across the country, millions are starting off the new year with Arctic cold temperatures. From the plains to the Mideast, forecasters say we're seeing some of the coldest weather of the season. But as Caitlin Burke reports, that didn't stop huge crowds from gathering to ring in the new year.
Massive crowds braved freezing temperatures to welcome in the new year. In New York City, millions watched the Waterford ball drop, celebrating in a blizzard of confetti.
Happy New Year!
In Chicago, fireworks lit up the sky. Crowds welcoming in the new year and bracing for at least 6 inches of snow. In Portland, Maine, these people braved the cold for a New Year's Eve 5K run and plunge into the ocean.
Fabulous.
Freezing.
Really
Freezing,
cold.
but fun. So fun.
Exhilarating. It's a great thing to do on New Year's Eve, and you bond with everybody who does it with you.
Forecasters say it won't be getting warmer anytime soon, and a large part of the country could start off the new year snowed in.
The storm is going to affect a large area. There will be enough snow to cause travel delays in the next 24 hours from Chicago to Denver.
That storm will then head towards the northeast, affecting cities from Washington, D.C., all the way up to New England. 6 to 12 inches of snow expected in some areas.
2014 is going to start off brutally cold across the eastern half of the United States with a departing snowstorm, and we could be looking at more cold and more snow early next week.
And forecasters warn that just as that storm is moving out, there's a chance that another will be moving in. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
U.S. stock markets closed out 2013 with some new record highs. Overall, stocks saw their biggest annual gains in almost 2 decades. Investors were showered with an almost 30% gain in a record-breaking run in the S&P 500. The S&P had its best year since 1997, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average saw its best annual performance since 1995. A record number of surgical abortion clinics in the U.S. closed in 2013. That's according to a survey by the pro-life organization Operation Rescue. The group found 87 clinics stopped performing surgical abortions. 81 permanently shut down, but 6 clinics still sell abortion-inducing drugs. The survey shows Texas has the most closures of surgical abortion clinics after an abortion law passed earlier in the year. Pennsylvania and Maryland also saw shutdowns because of new abortion clinic safety regulations. Obamacare goes into effect today, just as it still faces another legal challenge. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor has blocked part of the new law at the request of Catholic-affiliated groups from around the country. The groups oppose the contraception mandate. It forces religious organizations to provide health insurance that includes birth control and drugs that could induce abortions. Religious groups say that mandate violates their beliefs. Sotomayor says the government has until Friday morning to respond to her order. That's just one of many problems facing Obamacare. A recent poll showed that public support for the law has hit an all-time low. President Obama's pastor-in-chief is sharing his thoughts on the controversial birth control mandate in Obamacare. Joshua Dubois served as director of the White House Faith Office. He's compiled some of the daily devotions he sends the president in his new book, The President's Devotional. He also shares observations about the president and issues facing the White House, including the birth control mandate that pitted many Christians against his boss.
You write that in many instances you felt that you were the only person in the administration advocating for religious liberty. And you say, speaking of some senior White House officials, you write, their inability to make this relatively small concession to religious organizations seemed to me unreasonable at best, and at worst, destructive. Tell us about what a delicate time this was for you in your position.
Well, it was a very tough time, and the thing that essay in the book and the President's Devotional really illuminates is how I had to learn to deal a little bit better with disagreement, even when I disagree with folks that I care about and that I work with and that I'm close to. You know, I started in a place where I was questioning their motives and integrity and so forth, and God really shook me up and said that you can have a passionate disagreement on a really important issue, but you've still got to treat others with love and respect.
Dubois says the devotions he sends to President Obama are all Christ-centered. The failed launch of Obamacare was one of the top stories of 2013, but the impact of the president's health care law is just one factor that could make 2014 another tough year for his allies. This is an election year, and many Americans are looking to bring change to Washington. John Waggy has more.
Voters from red states and blue states are very divided, but one thing brings them together. They're not happy with Washington.
Well, I think people's frustration with Washington is perfectly placed. They ought to be frustrated.
For Democrats like presidential advisor David Plouffe, the Tea Party and congressional Republicans block progress with their attacks on the deficit and threats of government shutdown.
Because if your whole MO is, we're going to kind of burn the house down in order to save it, that's not going to work. And we do have divided government, and that's just a reality. And by the way, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. 14, 16, 18, nobody can predict.
But conservatives believe the left, aided by the mainstream media, threatens the very roots of American freedom, along with the country's fiscal well-being.
If you are a faith-based conservative, and you believe that Christianity has a major role to play in life, and that your values are derived from the Bible, you are the mortal opponent of at least half the news media. This isn't a question of, bad coverage or, they are on the other team. And so you have to start and understand that.
The year ahead will also mark the unofficial start of the 2016 presidential campaign. Former presidential candidate Michelle Bachmann told CBN's Chris Mitchell attacks from the left come straight out of the playbook for radicals.
You identify whoever the person is who's giving voice to the conservative goals and positions. You identify that target, you quote, paint the target, you freeze the target, and you malign the target. You ridicule, mock, lie about them.
Bachmann, who retires from Congress next year, says the climate has never been worse.
And unfortunately, the people on the conservative side tend to take their cues from the left-wing media. And so conservatives will decide that person is toxic. I guess we can't have anything to do with that person anymore. And so they'll stop volunteering, they'll stop donating, they'll stop voting for, they'll stop being a part of that person.
Democrats will have their hands full in this year's congressional elections as they try to govern from the White House while convincing voters that Democrats should control both the House and Senate.
One of the things we have to avoid doing is treating the period between elections as an opportunity to position ourselves for the next election. There ought to be a period of governing, a period of cooperation. I'm still hopeful that there are things that can get done in the next year that will be useful to the country.
The big monkey wrench could be Obamacare, which polls show the public still strongly opposes. Democratic strategists say they're not worried.
There's no doubt it's going to have to be improved upon going forward. And that's where both parties, it's the law of the land. I think that's not going to change.
For Republicans and conservatives, a key to mobilizing angry voters could be to focus more on what they support than what they oppose.
I think there's a huge potential American majority, not a Republican majority, not a narrow conservative majority, but a majority that is sick of Washington, sick of bureaucracy, sick of failure, sick of deficits, and wants something new that gives their children and grandchildren a better future.
John Waggy, CBN News.
Utah is taking the battle against same-sex marriage to the nation's highest court. On Tuesday, the state filed an emergency appeal with the Supreme Court to stop gay marriages. Same-sex unions became legal in Utah when a federal judge struck down the state's voter-approved ban. Nearly two-thirds of Utah's residents are Mormons. The Mormon Church says it stands by its support for traditional marriage and hopes a higher court validates its belief that marriage is between a man and a woman. The Southern Baptist Convention is criticizing a federal ruling about polygamy in Utah. The convention's top public policy official says decriminalizing polygamy puts vulnerable women and children at risk, and that the ruling also undermines the Bible's definition of marriage as the union of one man and one woman. The decision recently handed down by a federal judge says a Utah law that forbids cohabitation with another person violates the First Amendment. While the ruling does not legalize multiple marriages, it does mean that polygamous families who live together cannot be prosecuted. An MSNBC host apologized to 2012 Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney and his family for joking about a Christmas picture that showed his adopted African-American grandson. Melissa Harris Perry said her intention was to celebrate diversity, but the segment took an offensive turn when her panelists started joking about the baby not fitting in. MSNBC was forced to issue other apologies in 2013. Host Martin Bashir apologized and resigned last month after he made graphic remarks about former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. Coming up, flying robots that are as small as hummingbirds and can secretly record everything you do. Learn more about these nano drones next. The government will soon start conducting drone testing across 6 different states. The Federal Aviation Administration says Alaska, Nevada, New York, North Dakota, Texas, and Virginia will all be home to the new research sites. In the past, drones have mainly been used by the military, but that's been changing. The FAA says the new test sites will provide valuable information for safely incorporating new drone technology into the nation's skies.
There's many really good domestic applications, civil applications that you don't hear about too much now, but you're going to start hearing about a lot more in the next few years.
And while drones could open doors for more new and more efficient ways of doing business, they also raise serious concerns about privacy. Jennifer Wishon explains.
The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan introduced Americans to drones, unmanned aircraft capable of monitoring people and places from high in the sky. Today, some 50 government agencies use drones in the U.S., and in 2015, commercial use will be authorized. Some experts predict 30,000 will fly in American airspace by the end of the decade.
I mean, this does feel like something out of a science fiction novel.
It is.
It is.
Michael Toscano is president of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, which represents more than 7,500 drone enthusiasts in the U.S. and more than 50 countries. Drones can be as small as a hummingbird and larger than a jetliner, outfitted with everything from cameras to infrared technology to weapons.
This technology is literally an extension of the eyes, the ears, and the hands of a human being. If you can think of any, like I say, dirty, dangerous, or difficult mission that exists, or even dull ones, these systems do it very well.
Jobs for drones seem endless, from capturing 360-degree images of real estate to monitoring and spraying crops. Some police departments already use them, and advocates point to the Boston Marathon bombings and subsequent manhunt as an example of how drones can improve public safety.
When you're trying to cover a sports venue that's more than 26 miles long, you don't have that many policemen, even in a big city like Boston. Having drones rather than big giant manned aircraft to try and cover that area to watch to make sure that no one is doing anything illegal or dangerous would have been very helpful.
But use by law enforcement is controversial. The ACLU and other privacy advocates warn that drones will allow for pervasive surveillance in a way that could eventually eliminate the privacy Americans enjoy in their movements and activities. They also warn of discriminatory targeting against Americans who challenge the status quo, pointing to historic institutional abuses during the civil rights movement and other times of political conflict and social turmoil.
And it's not just law enforcement drones that has some people feeling concerned. For less than $300, anyone can buy one outfitted with a camera controllable by a smartphone. It's also pretty easy to make your own using a hobby kit. This could hover outside your window, operating as a virtual peeping Tom without you ever realizing you're being watched.
The what-ifs of the technology are prompting state governments to take action. 39 states have introduced legislation dealing with drones. 6 legislatures have passed them, ranging from moratoriums on their use to a resolution commending the industry.
Now, you don't use the word drone.
I do not.
Why is that?
Most people, when they hear the word drone, they think one, military, they think one, hostile, and they also think weaponized. Well, the FAA, and that is a misconception.
The FAA forbids deploying a weapon from any aircraft, manned or unmanned. But what if someone tries to take one over?
One of the major issues that has to be tested to make sure that someone can't either hack into it or to be able to unintended consequence of having multiple signals being passed that it causes a disruption.
Then there are disagreements over whether the Fourth Amendment protects Americans from unreasonable searches that could come from an unsuspecting eye in the sky.
I have a confidence that our judicial review process would work and we'll settle that gray area that's left in the middle, and we'll settle it with a correct balance of security and civil liberties.
Time will judge the benefits and risks, but the technology isn't going back into its box. By 2017, the drone industry is expected to employ at least 70,000 people, with an economic impact of nearly $14 billion.
The sky's the limit.
The sky's the limit of what you'll be able to see.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Up next, saving money when you're sick. Learn all about home remedies from the doctors of the Mayo Clinic. With a new year comes a new flu season. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says high levels of seasonal influenza are already being seen in southeastern parts of the country. The CDC says the main strain of flu being seen is H1N1. That's the same virus that caused the swine flu pandemic a couple years ago. The CDC is urging everyone to get vaccinated. Even though experts often encourage them, some people choose to bypass medicines and vaccines in order to treat themselves. Home remedies are popular among many people. Lori Johnson brings us some examples from a very reliable source.
For more than 100 years, patients from around the world have traveled to the Mayo Clinic for treatment. Now, for the first time, the famous facility is handing out do-it-yourself tips. Dr. Philip Hagen is the brains behind the Mayo Clinic Book of Home Remedies.
If someone has to come to the doctor, it's often going to cost $50 or $100 or $150. If they have to go into an emergency room, it may cost a lot more than that, $200, $300, $500, and that's a lot for anybody to pay.
Hagen asked his fellow Mayo physicians to list the most common things that their patients could take care of themselves. Topping the list, allergies and their causes, from seasonal pollens outside to irritants inside the house, like dust, pets, and mold.
Try to figure out what it is that you're reacting to, and often people can do that based on the time of year or the fact that they've got a pet. The second thing is to try to avoid the things that set off those allergies.
For example, here's how to fight dust allergens. Put a casing on your pillow and mattress. Wash your sheets in warm or hot water once a week. Vacuum every day if possible, and change your air filter every month. Another age-old treatment is to use a neti pot for rinsing your sinuses with warm salt water.
I like the movement of going back and looking at the wisdom of the ages and then applying a little science and a little testing to it to know whether it's safe for people to use.
If you have a cold or the flu, you can usually treat it at home, which over time saves lots of trips to the doctor. Because on average, preschoolers get 8 colds a year and everyone else about 3. Since there's no cure, the best medicine is to make yourself as comfortable as possible until it runs its course. But the Mayo docs say don't waste your money on over-the-counter cold preparations. For one thing, they should never be given to children under 2, and even older kids should stay away from decongestants, aspirin, and cough syrup. For anyone over 2, you can soothe a cough the natural way by mixing 2 teaspoons of honey into a cup of warm water, tea, or lemon juice. Research shows a little honey at bedtime reduced their nighttime coughing and improved sleep. A humidifier is a cheap and safe way to relieve coughs, congestion, and sore throats. Just make sure to clean it to prevent the growth of mold or bacteria. Gargling with warm salt water several times a day will help a sore throat. And believe it or not, chicken soup can make a difference. It's a proven anti-inflammatory, reduces mucus in the respiratory tract, and relieves congestion. You can possibly shorten the duration of a cold or flu by taking high doses of vitamin C, zinc lozenges, or the herbs echinacea and andrographis. Fevers, on the other hand, can be tricky. Those under 101 degrees should not be treated with medicine because low-grade fevers actually help the body eliminate a virus. But
if your child has a fever over 104, we think that's a time that it really is, you do need to go in and talk to the doctor and see. If you're an adult and you've got a fever and it's less than 101, we're comfortable with you watching it. If it's over 101, we're comfortable with you treating it with something like acetaminophen at home and caring for yourself. But if it stays at 101 or keeps coming back for a couple of days, then we do think you need to go see your doctor and try to figure out.
And no matter what time of year it is, millions of Americans need a little pain relief or a good night's sleep. Doctors say chili pepper seed, when used as a rub, is the most effective way to ease aching joints. And for insomnia, try a lavender fragrance and drink milk.
There's an amino acid in milk called tryptophan that helps make people sleepy. So we can do some things our grandparents would tell us to do. Have a glass of milk before you go to bed.
So take it from the experts. With a little know-how, home remedies can save you time and money. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Finally today, 86 families in Thailand experienced Christmas for the very first time in their lives thanks to CBN's Angel Tree Project. The isolated village of Bon Way Wat is home to families living in extreme poverty. So CBN launched the Angel Tree Project. Christmas trees were set up in city malls with the names and photos of village children so people could donate gifts. 118 children received Christmas gifts like backpacks and dolls, and they also watched Superbook's episode, The First Christmas. And that's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We hope you'll join us next time. Happy New Year and have a great day. God bless.